For 2 years, CEO Victoria Hayes barely knew Marcus Thornton existed. He was the quiet single father who fixed machines in the dark, always leaving before dawn, before anyone could thank him. Tonight at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday, Victoria sat alone in her corner office on the 32nd floor of Technova Industries, surrounded by glass and slits. The quarterly reports spread across her desk showed numbers that pleased her: 12% growth, operational costs down, shareholder value climbing. Everything functioned exactly as it should. The lights flickered. 3 seconds of darkness, then back. Victoria didn't look up from her laptop. Her desk phone rang. A man's voice, low and unhurried. Ms. Hayes, transformer issue resolved. No data loss. Good. She hung up without asking his name. The city sprawled below her windows, a grid of lights and ambition. Somewhere in the building's mechanical heart, someone had just saved 6 months of irreplaceable data. She would never know who. She would never think to ask. 3 weeks from now, everything she believed about power and control would shatter at an upscale restaurant. But tonight, Victoria Hayes returned to her spreadsheet, certain that success meant never needing anyone, never showing weakness, never letting sentiment cloud judgment. Her mother had been weak. Her mother had loved a man who promised forever and delivered abandonment instead. Young Victoria, watching her mother dissolve into depression, had made a vow that became the foundation of everything she built. Weakness gets left behind. Love is a liability successful people cannot afford. The belief had served her well. At 34, she ran an 800-person company with ruthless efficiency. The board had chosen her because she made decisions without hesitation, because she refused to let emotion interfere with results. Half the executive team still resented her for the brutal transition that had brought her to power. But resentment didn't matter. Only outcomes mattered. Victoria's apartment held no photographs, no mementos, no trace of human warmth. The penthouse was all clean lines and expensive emptiness. When Daniel Montgomery called for the 5th time that month, asking her to dinner, she declined with the same words she always used. "I don't do relationships. They're inefficient." The company's power structure shaped everything that happened within its walls. Richard Brennan, the chief financial officer, controlled numbers like weapons. Brilliant and manipulative, he had built an empire of influence through carefully constructed narratives that positioned him as indispensable. Victoria trusted him completely. Stephanie Drake, directed communications and public relations expert, at polishing the company's image until it gleamed. Her loyalty appeared absolute. Garrett Sullivan served as chief operating officer, practical, competent, carrying the burden of knowing things he couldn't yet prove. Miriam Blackwell ran human resources, processing paperwork, with quiet sympathy, lacking the authority to help the people she saw suffering. Victoria lived by a simple philosophy. Employees were positions on an organizational chart. When they stopped performing, you replaced them. Sentiment had no place in business decisions. 3 weeks before the restaurant, on a night when Victoria worked past midnight reviewing acquisition proposals, she heard something unusual. The building's intercom system, accidentally left open somewhere in the maintenance levels, carried a voice she didn't recognize. "No, you check voltage first." The man spoke with patient authority, teaching someone. "You want to go home to your family tonight, right? Good. Then respect electricity. It doesn't care about your deadline." Victoria paused, listening. The voice was calm, commanding attention without raising volume. It held the kind of natural confidence that couldn't be faked. She returned to her work after 30 seconds, filing the moment away as mildly interesting. Maintenance had someone competent. That was good. She didn't need to know more. Marcus Thornton's world existed in the spaces Victoria never saw. He worked the night shift 11 to 7, keeping the building's mechanical systems running while everyone else slept. At 7:15 each morning, he drove across town to pick up Emma from Mrs. Dorothy Fletcher's small house in Riverside. The elderly widow charged $15 a night to watch Emma while Marcus worked. It was money he could barely afford, but Mrs. Fletcher was kind and Emma felt safe with her. Marcus made breakfast in their one-bedroom apartment, pancakes shaped like stars because Emma loved them. She sat at their small kitchen table, swinging her legs, her gray eyes serious in a way that made her look older than 7. "Daddy, my school play is Friday. You'll come, right?" Marcus cracked another egg into the bowl, keeping his face neutral. He had submitted a schedule change request 2 weeks ago. Richard Brennan had denied it with a terse note about operational needs. Friday's play was at 2 in the afternoon. Marcus's new assigned shift ran 8 to 6. "I'll try my best, sweetheart, I really will." Emma nodded, accepting the uncertainty because she had learned not to push. She understood, in the way children who have lost one parent understand, that her father carried weight he couldn't set down. 4 years ago, a drunk driver had crossed the center line on Route 95. Sarah Thornton died before the ambulance arrived. Marcus, holding 3-year-old Emma in the hospital corridor, had made his own vow. He would never let his daughter feel abandoned. Whatever it cost him, he would show up. The apartment was clean but worn. Marcus slept on the couch so Emma could have the bedroom. Her drawings covered the refrigerator, horses, rainbows, family portraits that always showed 2 figures, now never 3. A photograph of Sarah sat on the bookshelf, her smile frozen in better days. Marcus had once been someone different. MIT graduate, mechanical engineering, summa cum laude. His thesis on predictive maintenance systems had earned him recruitment offers from half a dozen Fortune 500 companies. He had chosen Technova because they were building something revolutionary in cybersecurity infrastructure, because the technical challenges excited him, because the future seemed limitless. Then Sarah died and the future collapsed into a single imperative: keep Emma safe. Keep Emma stable, don't let anything else break. He had requested a demotion to night maintenance. The pay was less, but the hours were flexible, the pressure minimal. He could be invisible, which meant he could be reliable. Visibility meant risk, and risk meant the possibility of losing what remained. Jake Morrison, a younger technician who worked the same shift, tried every week to get Marcus to join him for drinks after work. Every week Marcus declined with the same explanation: "Can't, gotta pick up my daughter." Jake stopped asking after 6 months. Marcus became part of the building's infrastructure, noticed only when something broke. But invisibility had its costs. Deep in the HR system, locked behind CFO-level authorization, sat a file marked "Confidential Thornton Marcus." Miriam Blackwell had discovered it by accident while searching for unrelated personnel records. The file required Richard Brennan's password to open. When she tried, the system denied access and logged her attempt. Miriam sat alone in her office at 6 in the evening, staring at the error message. Why would the chief financial officer personally lock a maintenance worker's file? She took a photograph of her screen with her personal phone, capturing the metadata. The date the file was created, the authorization signature, the timestamp. 3.5 years ago, 6 months after Marcus had been promoted to senior engineer. 1 week after his wife's death, she saved the image to a USB drive and locked it in her desk drawer. She didn't know what it meant yet, but instinct told her it would matter. 2 weeks before the restaurant, Victoria stepped into an elevator on the 18th floor, accompanied by Robert Callahan and 3 potential investors. They were discussing a deal that would bring in $50 million in capital, restructure the company's international expansion position, Technova, for an eventual IPO. Preston Whitmore, a tech billionaire from Seattle, was explaining his vision for the Asian market. Patricia Mercer, who controlled a venture capital fund worth $2 billion, was nodding thoughtfully. Thomas Bradford, the third investor, was checking his phone. The elevator descended smoothly for 3 floors. Then it stopped. The lights stayed on, but the car didn't move. Robert pushed the button for the lobby. Nothing happened. He pushed the emergency call button. A tinny voice crackled through the speaker. "We see you. Fire department is 20 minutes out." 20 minutes? Robert's voice climbed. He was 61 years old with a documented heart condition. His face was already flushing red. Patricia Mercer, who suffered from claustrophobia, pressed herself against the wall. Her breathing quickened. Victoria felt her stomach tighten, but she kept her expression calm. We'll be fine. 20 minutes is manageable. Robert loosened his tie. His hand shook. In the basement mechanical room, Marcus was eating a sandwich at his workstation when the emergency radio squawked, "All units, elevator 3, code red, fire department ETA 20 minutes. He was on his lunch break. Technically, someone else should respond. But Jake was on the opposite side of the building, and Marcus had built these elevator systems. He knew every cable, every circuit, every potential failure point. 20 minutes. Robert Callahan could have a heart attack in 20 minutes. Marcus grabbed his tools and ran for the elevator shaft. The service ladder was bolted to the wall, narrow and unlit. Climbing it violated half a dozen safety protocols. If anyone found out, he could be fired. But people were trapped, and he had the skills to help. His hands bled from gripping rough metal cables in the dark. Sweat dripped into his eyes. The manual brake release required 200 pounds of force applied at exactly the right angle. He braced his feet against the shaft wall and pulled muscles screaming, refusing to quit. 8 minutes after the elevator stopped, the doors opened. Robert Callahan stumbled out, pale but breathing. Patricia Mercer followed, gulping air. The investors looked shaken but unharmed. "Who fixed it?" Robert demanded. The security guard who had arrived with the fire department shrugged. "Maintenance, I think. I want to thank them. I'll find out who it was." But by the time anyone thought to check, Marcus was back in the basement finishing his sandwich. His hands were still trembling from adrenaline and fear. Not fear of the danger he had just faced, but fear of being too late to pick up Emma. He had 13 minutes to clean up, clock out, and get to Lincoln Elementary School before Emma started to worry. He made it with 3 minutes to spare, arriving with his shirt still stained with grease. Miss Jennifer Walsh, Emma's second-grade teacher, stood with Emma at the pickup area. The little girl's face brightened when she saw her father's truck. "I thought you forgot me." Marcus knelt, ignoring the pain in his bleeding palms. "Never, baby girl. Daddy will always come. I just had to help someone." Emma hugged him fiercely. Marcus held her and felt the adrenaline finally fade, replaced by the bone-deep exhaustion of a man who had been awake for 22 hours straight. Victoria never asked who had saved them. The elevator worked again. That was all that mattered. 1 week before the restaurant, Garrett Sullivan was searching through archived files for a proposal he had written 18 months earlier. He needed to reference some projections for an upcoming board presentation. While scrolling through the engineering department's shared drive, he stumbled across a document that made him stop breathing. The file was labeled Predictive Maintenance Algorithm Using IoT Sensors. Author Marcus Thornton. Date 2.5 years ago. Garrett opened it. The innovation was elegant, a system that used networked sensors to predict equipment failures before they happened, potentially saving millions in downtime and emergency repairs. The algorithm was sophisticated, the kind of work that came from deep expertise and creative problem-solving. He checked the current company records. The same report existed, but with different metadata. Author Finance Department Innovation Team led by Richard Brennan. Submission date 6 months after Marcus's original version. Garrett's hands went cold. He compared the code. Embedded in the variable names like a signature hidden in plain sight were Marcus's initials MT. It was an old engineer's habit, marking your work in ways only another engineer would recognize. Someone had stolen Marcus's innovation, stripped his name from it, and claimed credit. Someone with the authority to alter company records and bury the original. Garrett printed both versions. He locked them in his home safe and said nothing. Not yet. But suspicion had taken root, and it was growing. That same week, Victoria sat through a board meeting discussing rising maintenance costs. Richard Brennan suggested cutting what he called low-performing departments. Stephanie Drake added that maintenance staff were always requesting accommodations, schedule changes, benefits, adjustments, special considerations. She used the word entitlement 3 times. Victoria found herself frustrated by a different issue entirely. The predictive algorithm Richard's team had supposedly developed was still not implemented. "What's the status on that IoT maintenance system?" she asked. "The one Finance developed last year." Richard's smile was practiced and smooth. Still in testing. These things take time to get right. Victoria accepted the answer. She trusted Richard. He had been with the company for 8 years, had steered them through 2 recessions, had personally negotiated deals that saved Technova from bankruptcy. If Richard said something took time, it took time. 3 nights before the restaurant, Victoria worked late again. The building was silent except for the hum of servers in the data center below. She was reviewing a hostile takeover attempt by a competitor when she heard Marcus's voice over the intercom again. "Control, I'm checking Sector 7 backup generator. Last inspection log shows inconsistencies." A pause. Then 20 minutes later, "Found it. Someone faked inspection signatures. This generator would have failed during the next power outage. Could have been catastrophic." The security dispatcher's voice crackled back. "Should we report it?" Marcus's reply was quiet, tired. "Just fix the log and schedule a real inspection. I don't need credit." Victoria stopped typing. Something in that exchange needled her. A man finding evidence of negligence, possibly fraud, and his first instinct was to fix it quietly rather than claim recognition. It was so foreign to her experience that she almost couldn't process it. She returned to her work, but the moment lingered. Friday afternoon, Marcus worked his 3rd consecutive double shift. His body was screaming for sleep, but Emma's school play started at 2. And he had promised to try. The play was The Lion King. Emma had been cast as young Nala, and she had been practicing her lines for weeks. Richard had denied his schedule change. Marcus went anyway. He sat in the back row of the elementary school auditorium, still wearing his security guard uniform from the 2nd job he'd picked up to make rent that month. His eyes burned, his shoulders ached. But when Emma walked onto that small stage and saw her father in the audience, her face transformed with joy, and every hour of exhaustion became worth it. After the play, Ms. Walsh approached him in the hallway. "Emma was so worried you'd miss it. She talks about you constantly, Mr. Thornton." "I'll always show up for her," Marcus said, and meant it with every cell in his body. "Always." Across town, Victoria's phone rang during a business lunch. Her mother's name appeared on the screen. Victoria declined the call and returned to her conversation about quarterly projections. Saturday night, Victoria sat in a corner booth at Rothschild's, one of the city's most expensive restaurants. The booth offered a perfect view of the dining room and the city lights beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. Robert Callahan sat to her right, Preston Whitmore and Patricia Mercer across the table. They were negotiating the sale of a 20% equity stake that would value Technova at $350 million. Preston was mid-sentence explaining his concerns about the regulatory environment in overseas markets, when Victoria's attention caught on movement near the entrance. A man in a charcoal suit walked through the door, tailored, well-fitted, expensive enough to belong in this room. Dark hair, tall frame, moving with quiet confidence. He was with a woman, brunette, elegant in a black dress, professional but warm. The hostess led them to a table near the windows. City lights glittered behind them like stars. Victoria's breath stopped. That face. She knew that face. Gray eyes, a scar on his left hand visible when he reached for his water glass. But the context was all wrong. Maintenance workers didn't eat at Rothschild's. Maintenance workers didn't wear suits that fit like that. Maintenance workers didn't sit at window tables looking like they had been born to rooms exactly like this one. "Victoria," Patricia's voice pulled her back. "Are you all right?" "Fine. I just thought I saw someone I knew." She forced her attention back to the negotiation, but her eyes kept drifting. The man Marcus, it had to be Marcus Thornton, though seeing him here made no sense, was listening to his companion with complete focus. The woman leaned close, speaking quietly but intensely. Their body language suggested intimacy, trust, a connection that went deeper than a casual dinner. Then Marcus smiled, really smiled with warmth that transformed his entire face. It was nothing like the neutral mask he wore at work, nothing like the exhausted politeness he showed when passing executives in hallways. This smile was genuine, unguarded, alive. Victoria's water glass trembled in her hand. Who was this woman? What did she have that could make him look like that? 10 minutes later, Robert and Preston were debating margin structures, their voices rising with competitive energy. The restaurant noise ebbed for a moment, kitchen doors closed live. Piano music paused between songs. In that brief silence, Victoria heard the woman's voice carry from 2 tables away. "Tomorrow, if you sign these papers, Richard will have nowhere to run." The woman's tone was urgent, emphasizing each word. "But Marcus, if you withdraw testimony, he'll bury everything." Marcus's reply was too quiet to hear, but his expression showed conflict. Victoria's mind spun Richard here, Richard Papers' testimony. What possible connection could a maintenance worker have to her chief financial officer? She excused herself to the restroom, a transparent excuse to walk past Marcus's table. As she passed, she heard fragments of conversation. "You deserve justice. He stole 3 years of your work." Victoria's stomach clenched. She continued to the restroom, locked herself in a stall, and tried to steady her breathing. When she returned to her table, she could barely focus on the conversation. Preston was asking about projected growth rates. Patricia wanted clarification on board structure. Robert was calculating numbers on his phone. Victoria nodded at appropriate moments and gave answers that sounded confident. Inside, she was falling. That night, she couldn't sleep. At 2 in the morning, she sat on her apartment balcony 30 floors above the city and replayed every detail. The suit, the smile, the woman's hand on his, the words, "Richard will have nowhere to run." By Monday morning, Victoria had made a decision. She needed information. "Stephanie, I need background on someone." Stephanie Drake looked up from her laptop, perfectly composed as always. "A competitor, a journalist. Internal, maintenance department. I saw him over the weekend and I need his name." Stephanie's eyebrow arched. "Why would you need information on maintenance?" Victoria's voice went sharp. "Just get me the name." "There are 40 people in maintenance. Tall, dark hair, gray eyes. Works night shift." Stephanie consulted her employee database. "Marcus Thornton. Why the interest?" "Operational curiosity, that's all." Stephanie's smile was practiced. "Of course." The moment Victoria left, Stephanie called Richard Brennan. Victoria asked about Marcus Thornton. Richard's pause was heavy. "She saw him with Rebecca." "Should I be concerned?" "Keep her distracted. I'll handle Marcus." Victoria didn't stop with Stephanie's information. She called Howard and Associates, a private investigation firm the company used for corporate due diligence. "I need a complete background check. Marcus Thornton, employment history, known associates, financial records, everything." 48 hours later, a 30-page report arrived. Victoria read it in her apartment, curtains drawn, ignoring calls from Daniel Montgomery asking about dinner. The report painted a picture she hadn't expected. Single father. Daughter Emma, age 7, mother deceased in automobile accident 4 years prior. Residence, Riverside Apartments, Unit 3B, monthly rent $1,100. Known associates included Rebecca Ashford, forensic accountant, and attorney. Meetings occurring at Thornton's apartment, local coffee shops, and Ashford's law office. Photographs showed Marcus and Rebecca reviewing documents at his small kitchen table. No physical intimacy, no romantic gestures, just 2 people working toward a common goal. But the photographs also showed something else. In the background of one image, visible through an open window, a child's drawing was taped to a refrigerator. A house, 2 stick figures holding hands, the words "me" and "daddy" written in uneven letters. Victoria stared at that photograph for 10 minutes. Her conclusions were wrong, but she didn't know it yet. She saw a woman holding Marcus's hand at dinner. She saw secret meetings and mysterious documents. She constructed a narrative of betrayal and corporate espionage because those were the narratives she understood. What she didn't see was the truth. Rebecca Ashford was investigating the largest fraud in Technova's history. And Marcus Thornton was the key witness who could bring it all down. Tuesday morning, Victoria called Marcus to her office. He arrived at 9, having just finished his overnight shift. 22 hours awake, body running on fumes and coffee. He still wore his work clothes uniform stained with machine oil tool belt heavy on his hips. Victoria's office was a monument to power. Floor-to-ceiling windows, modern art that cost more than Marcus made in a year, furniture designed to intimidate. She gestured to the chair across from her desk. "Mr. Thornton, sit." Marcus remained standing. "I pick up my daughter in 30 minutes. What do you need?" The directness surprised her. She had expected deference apology, the usual performance subordinates gave when summoned by the CEO. Instead, he looked at her with tired eyes and waited. "I'm assigning you to a special project. Equipment audit for next month's investor meeting. You'll report directly to me. That's not in my job description. I'm maintenance, not it is now, unless you're refusing a direct assignment from the CEO." Marcus processed the trap, seeing its shape, but not its purpose. "Will I be allowed to keep a schedule that lets me pick up Emma?" Victoria heard the name and felt something twist inside her. He was using his daughter as leverage, or was this about the woman at the restaurant showing? He had commitments couldn't be controlled. "We'll see how your performance goes. Priorities, Mr. Thornton." Marcus understood then. This wasn't about an audit. This was about control. "I'm a single father. My daughter needs consistency. If you can't accommodate that, I'll find work elsewhere." Victoria's pride stung. He wasn't afraid of her, wasn't impressed, wasn't playing the game. "You'd quit over a schedule change." "I'd do anything for Emma, including working 3 jobs, but I won't work somewhere that punishes me for being a parent." He left without waiting for dismissal. Victoria sat alone in her office, feeling like she had won and lost something simultaneously. Within the hour, Richard Brennan called. "I heard you're pulling Marcus Thornton for a special project. Smart move, but be careful." "Careful of what?" "He's filed complaints before. Always about accommodation schedule, flexibility, HR nightmare. And I've heard rumors he's been meeting with outside parties. Could be corporate espionage." Victoria's jealousy and suspicion fused into certainty. "I'll watch him closely." "Good. We can't afford security risks, not with the investor deal so close." The next day, Marcus received a new schedule, 8 to 6 Monday through Friday. No flexibility, no exceptions. School pickup was 3:30. He would need to leave by 3:15 to make it. He went to Miriam Blackwell. "I can't do this schedule." Miriam's eyes showed sympathy, but her hands were tied. "Richard approved it. He says it's operational necessity. Emma has no one else. If I can't pick her up..." "I'm so sorry, Marcus, I truly am, but I don't have authority to override the CFO." Marcus arranged emergency backup. Mrs. Fletcher agreed to handle school pickup for $20 a day. The money would come from somewhere, it had to. Emma sensed the tension that night at dinner. "Daddy, is everything okay?" Marcus smiled, lying to protect her. "Everything's fine, sweetheart, just work stuff." The next day at school, Emma drew a picture during art class. Her teacher found it later tucked in her desk, a man with a sad face. The title in Emma's careful printing, "Daddy's Tired." Stephanie Drake moved through the executive level like smoke planting seeds in carefully chosen conversations. She mentioned to Garrett Sullivan that Marcus had been seen meeting with external consultants. She suggested to Robert Callahan that his timing seemed suspicious right before a major investor deal. She wondered aloud whether anyone else found it concerning. The whispers spread. The quiet one is always the dangerous one. Watch out for the ones who never complain. Friday afternoon, Victoria called Marcus to a conference room. Garrett and Miriam were present as witnesses, official, documented, serious. "Explain your relationship with Rebecca Ashford." Marcus understood immediately why he was here. "She's a lawyer." "That doesn't answer my question. What are you discussing with her?" "That's privileged information." Victoria's voice went cold as winter. "Are you selling company information, Mr. Thornton?" The accusation hung in the air like poison. Marcus felt the insult not in the words themselves, but in what they revealed. She thought he was a thief. After 2 years of fixing her company in darkness, saving her systems, preventing catastrophes, she would never know about she thought he was a thief. "I work here because my daughter needs health insurance." His voice stayed quiet, steady. That's the only reason. Then prove your loyalty. From now on, you follow my schedule. No exceptions, no accommodations. If you can't commit fully to this company, perhaps you should reconsider your employment. Marcus pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. He had prepared it yesterday, knowing this moment would come. He placed it on the conference table between them. Resignation letter, effective immediately. Miriam gasped. Garrett stood. Let's discuss. Marcus looked at Victoria, meeting her eyes with absolute clarity. I've endured disrespect before, but I won't let my daughter grow up watching me be treated like I'm worthless. He walked out. The door closed. Silence filled the room like water rising. Victoria stared at the letter, feeling triumph and loss and confusion warring inside her. She had won. She had lost something. She didn't know what it was, but she felt its absence like a missing tooth tongue probing the gap, finding only emptiness. Marcus picked Emma up from school on time for once. She looked at his face and knew. Daddy, why do you look like that? I quit my job today. Emma's face went white. She was 7 years old, but she understood what job loss could mean. She had already lost her mother. Was she going to lose her father too because of me? No, baby, never because of you. Emma's voice went small and broken. Is it because of that lady, the mean one? Marcus didn't answer. His silence confirmed it. Emma turned to look out the car window, her small face settling into an expression too old for her years. In her mind, a simple truth formed: I hate her. That night, Technova's systems began showing unusual errors. Small things at first: database queries timing out, backup systems running slower than normal, redundancy checks failing in ways that looked almost natural. Nothing catastrophic, not yet. But to someone who knew these systems intimately, someone who had built them and maintained them and understood every line of code, the pattern was clear. Someone was removing safety measures piece by piece, letting the machinery spin toward inevitable disaster. The IT security log recorded an unauthorized access attempt at 11:47 p.m. Origin Finance Department server. Access granted via legacy credentials. User ID deleted. Duration 4 minutes. Systems modified, backup protocols, failover triggers, redundancy checks. The morning notification landed in Victoria's inbox at 7 a.m. Minor technical issues overnight. IT investigating. No data loss. Victoria, distracted by Marcus's resignation, by the hollow feeling in her chest she couldn't name, by dreams that had kept her awake until 3, dismissed it with a single line. Keep me updated. She didn't connect the dots, not yet. But the countdown had begun, and the CEO who thought she controlled everything was about to discover just how little she truly understood about the company she ran, the people who kept it alive, and the man she had just driven away. The weekend after Marcus quit passed in slow agony for Victoria. Saturday morning she went to the office as she always did, but found herself staring at the same spreadsheet for an hour without processing the numbers. The city stretched out below her windows, indifferent to her confusion. She kept replaying the restaurant scene in her mind, watching Marcus smile at that woman, hearing fragments of conversation that made no sense. Richard will have nowhere to run. Sunday she did something she hadn't done in years. She stayed home. No laptop, no phone calls, just silence and the growing recognition that something fundamental had shifted inside her and she couldn't name it. Monday morning brought a decision she knew was reckless but couldn't stop herself from making. She called Howard and Associates again. I need expanded surveillance on Marcus Thornton. The investigator's voice held professional neutrality. What specifically are you looking for, Ms. Hayes? Everything. Where he goes, who he meets, what documents he handles, full coverage. A pause. Ma'am, I should mention he's no longer your employee. This enters personal privacy territory. Are you certain? Victoria's tone went sharp enough to cut. I'm paying you to investigate, not to question my decisions. Do it. The file arrived Sunday evening. 60 pages this time, dense with surveillance photographs and audio transcripts captured via parabolic microphone from public spaces. Legal, the investigator assured her. Everything obtained from locations where there was no reasonable expectation of privacy. Victoria spread the documents across her dining room table and began to read. Marcus lived in a building that had seen better decades. Peeling paint cracked concrete steps, hallways that smelled of old cooking and worn-out lives. The surveillance photos showed him carrying Emma up those stairs. The little girl's arms around his neck, her face pressed against his shoulder. Another image captured them at their small kitchen table, Emma doing homework while Marcus made dinner. Spaghetti from the looks of it. Nothing fancy, just a father and daughter navigating an ordinary evening. Rebecca Ashford appeared in the photographs 3 times that week. She arrived carrying a briefcase left several hours later. No sign of romantic intimacy. One image showed all 3 of them at the kitchen table, Emma coloring, while the adults reviewed documents spread across every available surface. The audio transcript made Victoria's hands go cold. Rebecca's voice captured through an open window from the street below. If you withdraw your testimony, Richard wins. He'll restructure the shell companies, hide the evidence. Hundreds of people could lose their jobs when he asset strips the company for personal profit. Marcus quieter but clear. I've endured enough humiliation. Emma doesn't need this stress. Rebecca again. Your innovations were worth $8 million in value. He stole them and sold components to competitors. That's not just theft, Marcus. It's fraud, federal fraud. Victoria sat back in her chair, the apartment silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. Her mind rearranged everything she thought she knew. Rebecca wasn't a lover. She was a lawyer, an investigator, and the target of her investigation was Richard Brennan, the man Victoria had trusted with every financial decision for 2 years. She cross-referenced company records, searching for shell companies, subsidiary structures, anything that might support what she'd heard. The records were clean. Too clean. Richard controlled the financial documentation. If he was hiding something, she wouldn't find it in systems he managed. At 11 that night, Victoria did something she never did. She called her mother back. The phone rang 4 times before Eleanor Hayes answered, surprise evident in her hello. Victoria, is everything all right? I don't know. The admission felt like falling. Mom, how did you know Dad was lying? A long pause. Then Eleanor's voice, sad and wise. I didn't, darling. Not until it was too late. I believed what I wanted to believe because the truth was too frightening. They talked for 30 minutes. When Victoria hung up, she felt raw and exposed, like she'd peeled off protective armor and found her skin underneath too tender for the world. Monday morning arrived with the force of catastrophe. At 9 a.m., the warehouse management system crashed. 3,000 orders frozen in processing, unable to generate shipping labels, stuck in digital limbo. Customer service phones began ringing immediately, angry clients demanding explanations Victoria couldn't provide. She convened an emergency meeting in the main conference room. IT Director Thomas Brennan, no relation to Richard despite the shared surname, stood at the front looking like he hadn't slept. Garrett Sullivan sat to Victoria's right, already running calculations on his laptop. Stephanie Drake took notes with practiced efficiency. What happened? Victoria's voice cut through the nervous energy. Thomas wiped sweat from his forehead. We don't know. System was fine Friday evening. Now the core database won't respond. It's like someone severed the connection between the application layer and data storage. How long to fix it? We're still diagnosing. Could be hours, could be days. Richard Brennan entered the room with the calm of someone who'd been expecting this. His silver hair was perfectly combed, his Brooks Brothers suit immaculate. He moved to the head of the table like he owned it. This is catastrophic. His voice held just the right note of concern. We have the Stellaris contract signing at 2 this afternoon. They're flying their CEO in from DC. If we can't demonstrate operational stability, I'm aware of the stakes. Victoria's jaw tightened. The Stellaris Defense Systems contract was worth $45 million over 3 years. Losing it would damage Technova's credibility beyond repair. Make the investor deal collapse, potentially cost Victoria her position. Robert Callahan called her personal cell before 10. His voice vibrated with barely controlled anger. Victoria, if this contract falls through the board, we'll have serious questions about your leadership. We cannot afford operational failure of this magnitude. I understand. We're working on it. Work faster. The line went dead. Thomas and his team spent the next 2 hours tearing through code-checking servers, running diagnostics that yielded nothing useful. At 11, he made a discovery that changed everything. We found the issue. Someone modified the backup protocols 3 days ago, disabled the redundancy systems, corrupted the failover triggers. It's surgical damage designed to cascade through the infrastructure. Victoria leaned forward. Who? The access log shows finance department server, but the specific user ID was deleted from the system. Every eye in the room turned to Richard. He held up his hands, expression perfectly calibrated to show shock and concern. Not that I'm aware of. This could be a security breach. We should investigate external threats. Stephanie jumped in immediately, her loyalty to Richard evident. It does seem suspicious. Marcus Thornton had deep system access. He quit Friday under hostile circumstances. The timing is convenient. Garrett's voice cut across hers, calm but pointed. Conveniently places blame on someone who's no longer here to defend himself. Richard's eyes narrowed slightly. I'm simply suggesting we explore all possibilities. If someone wanted to sabotage us, then they'd need administrator credentials and intimate knowledge of our architecture. Garrett pulled up a file on his laptop. The kind of knowledge that comes from either building the systems or having access to the people who did. The tension in the room thickened. Victoria felt it pressing against her chest, making it hard to breathe. One option was easy blame Marcus, protect the company's image, move forward. The other option meant questioning Richard, potentially exposing internal corruption, risking everything in pursuit of truth. Stephanie laid it out explicitly during a break, pulling Victoria aside in the hallway. We need damage control. I've prepared a statement framing this as disgruntled employee sabotage. We report Marcus Thornton to the FBI for corporate espionage. The narrative is clean, protects the company, gives the board someone to blame besides you. Victoria looked at the statement Stephanie had drafted. It was comprehensive, convincing, complete character assassination disguised as responsible corporate governance. You want me to destroy a man's reputation to save face. I want you to save the company. He's already gone. Whether or not he actually did this, the story works. Unless you have a better option. Victoria folded the statement and put it in her pocket. She didn't respond. Across town, Marcus sat at his kitchen table, Emma at school, unemployment stretching ahead of him like a desert. His phone rang. Rebecca's number. Marcus, did you hear about Technova's systems crashing? No. Why would I? Richard activated the back door. He's framing you as the saboteur. The words took a moment to land. When they did, Marcus felt something cold settle into his bones. I don't have access anymore. That's the point. You're the perfect scapegoat. Technical knowledge just left the company. Can't defend yourself from inside. Richard needs this chaos to drive down the stock price. It's the last step before the takeover attempt. Marcus closed his eyes. What do I do? We need to get Victoria to let you back in. You're the only one who can identify what Richard did to the system and prove it wasn't you. She won't listen to me. Then we need to make her listen. Because if she doesn't, Richard walks away clean and you go to prison for federal crimes you didn't commit. While Victoria wrestled with her decision, Garrett Sullivan was conducting his own investigation. Something about the error cascade bothered him, the precision of it, the timing, the way it hit every critical system without causing complete collapse. This wasn't random failure. This was deliberate surgical sabotage by someone who understood exactly how to inflict maximum damage while maintaining plausible deniability. He pulled access logs from his COO administrative account, digging through layers of security records most people didn't know existed. What he found made his blood run cold. Marcus Thornton's credentials had been used to create the backdoor 8 months ago. But Marcus hadn't created it. Someone had cloned his login information, used it to build the exploit, then deleted the evidence. The cloning event occurred one day after Richard Brennan had accessed the locked HR file about Marcus. Garrett printed the evidence and locked it in his briefcase. Then he called Miriam Blackwell. "We need to talk, not at the office." They met at a coffee shop 6 blocks from Technova headquarters. Miriam arrived first, looking nervous. Garrett slid into the booth across from her and opened his briefcase. "Tell me about the locked file." Miriam pulled out her phone, showing him the photograph she'd taken weeks ago. The metadata, the authorization signature, the timestamp. Garrett added his own evidence, the technical report with altered authorship, the cloned credentials, the access patterns that pointed directly at Richard's server. "He's been stealing Marcus's work for 3 years." Miriam's voice shook. "And now he's framing him for sabotage. The question is, why the back door now? Why trigger it this week?" Miriam scrolled through her phone, pulling up internal communications she'd archived. "Look at this. Email from Richard to his personal attorney sent last month. Subject line: acquisition timing and stock price targets." Garrett read the email twice. His legal training wasn't extensive, but he recognized the shape of what he was seeing. Richard had been coordinating with an external investment group planning to acquire controlling interest in Technova. The sabotage would crash the stock price, create panic, make shares available at a steep discount. Classic hostile takeover disguised as operational failure. "We need to tell Victoria. She trusts Richard completely. She'll think we're crazy. Then we need proof she can't deny." They spent the next hour assembling a case file, screenshots, access logs, the original technical reports, email chains that Richard thought were deleted, but lived on in backup servers Miriam could access through HR systems. By the time they finished, the evidence was overwhelming. But would Victoria believe it? Or would her faith in Richard blind her to the truth at 1:15:45 minutes before the Stellaris contract signing? Victoria stood in her office looking out at the city. Thomas had reported no progress on fixing the systems. The Stellaris CEO had called twice, asking about the delays. The board was circling, smelling blood in the water. Stephanie's statement sat on Victoria's desk, ready to release. All she had to do was approve it, send it to the media, watch Marcus Thornton become a national villain. It would save her position, protect the company, give everyone an easy answer to an impossible situation. But Victoria kept thinking about the surveillance photos. Marcus carrying Emma up those cracked stairs. The small apartment, clean but worn. The little girl's drawings on the refrigerator. The way Marcus had looked at her in the conference room and told her the simple truth: "I work here because my daughter needs health insurance." She thought about his voice over the intercom, teaching a junior technician to respect electricity because he wanted everyone to go home safely. She thought about him fixing the generator without taking credit, saving them in the elevator without asking for recognition, doing the right thing in the dark because it was right, not because anyone would notice. And she thought about his smile at the restaurant, the real smile meant for someone who saw him as human. The smile she had never earned because she had never tried to see him at all. Victoria picked up her phone and dialed. Marcus answered on the third ring, wariness in his hello. Her throat felt tight, words difficult to form. "I need you to come back, temporarily. The systems are failing and I need someone who understands them well enough to fix them." The silence stretched so long she thought he'd hung up. Then, "You think I sabotaged them?" "I don't know what I think. But even if you did, I'm willing to overlook it if you fix it." His laugh was cold and bitter. "You're unbelievable. You're offering me nothing. You want me to save your company so you can throw me away again when it's convenient. Why would I do that?" "Because..." Victoria grasped for an argument and found only honesty. "Because I was wrong. About Rebecca. About the accusations. About everything." Another long silence. Then, "I need to think." He hung up. Victoria stood holding the dead phone, feeling like she'd just failed a test she hadn't known she was taking. 20 minutes later, her secretary buzzed. "Ms. Hayes, someone's here to see you, says it's urgent." Marcus walked into her office alone. He looked like he hadn't slept, dark circles under his eyes, stubble shadowing his jaw. But his posture was straight, his gaze level. If I come back and that's if here's what happens, Rebecca Ashford participates fully. No one silences her or sidelines her investigation. Garrett Sullivan and Miriam Blackwell witness everything. No private deals with Richard, no backroom negotiations. And if we expose Richard's crimes, you stand with us publicly, even if it costs you your position. Victoria nodded to each condition. Agreed. What else? Emma, you don't get to use her. You don't get to charm her. You stay away from my daughter. The condition hurt more than it should have. Victoria forced herself to nod. Understood. Marcus pulled a laptop from his bag, personal equipment not company issued. He sat at Victoria's conference table and began typing before she could say anything else. 40 minutes of watching him work taught Victoria things about Marcus she'd never known. His fingers moved across the keyboard with the fluid precision of a concert pianist. He muttered to himself fragments of technical reasoning that made no sense to her but clearly formed a coherent logic in his mind. Twice he laughed quietly at something he found in the code, not humor but recognition. What is it? Marcus didn't look up. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. They disabled fail-safes in sequence so each failure looks like natural degradation. It's elegant, actually. If I weren't trying to fix it, I'd admire the craftsmanship. Can you repair it in time? I can find the back door. Repairing it will take hours. Your signing is in... He checked the clock. 23 minutes. You'll need to postpone. Victoria's stomach sank. Postponing meant admitting failure, showing weakness, potentially losing the contract entirely. Rebecca arrived 15 minutes later carrying 3 boxes of documents that she dropped on Victoria's conference table with a heavy thud. She was all business professional armor in place, no warmth in her eyes when she looked at Victoria. Marcus, show her what you found. Marcus turned his laptop screen so both women could see. Lines of code filled the display, meaningless to Victoria but clearly significant to the others. This is the back door. It's built from pieces of code I wrote 2.5 years ago, the predictive maintenance algorithm. Whoever created this exploit used my original work, copied my coding style, embedded my signature patterns. If anyone investigated, the trail would lead directly to me. Victoria felt cold spreading through her chest. Who has access to your original code? It was filed with the engineering department, but someone deleted it from those servers and moved it to finance. Richard, that's my guess. Rebecca opened one of her boxes, pulling out printed spreadsheets covered in highlighter marks and handwritten notes. She spread them across the table like laying out evidence at a trial. I was hired 3 months ago by an anonymous member of your board to investigate financial irregularities. The IRS had flagged Technova for suspicious transactions, and someone inside wanted to know if there was real fraud or just sloppy bookkeeping. Victoria found her voice. Who hired you? That stays confidential until I'm ready to testify. But what I found goes beyond sloppy bookkeeping. Rebecca pulled out another document. Richard Brennan has been embezzling through false vendor contracts. This one, for example, Apex Consulting Solutions, paid $200,000 over 6 months for services that were never rendered. The company's registered agent is Richard's brother-in-law. More documents, more evidence. Each one a nail in a coffin Victoria could see taking shape. Shell companies in the Cayman Islands, wire transfers to accounts in Cyprus and the British Virgin Islands. Intellectual property sold piecemeal to competitors through intermediary firms that all traced back to people in Richard's network. $12 million over 3 years vanished into offshore accounts, while Richard drove a Porsche and took weekend trips to Aspen. And the back door? Victoria's voice sounded hollow in her own ears. Insurance. When Marcus quit, Richard knew his time was limited. I'd been asking questions, requesting documents. He activated the sabotage to crash your stock price. There's an investment group ready to acquire controlling interest at 40% discount once the market panics. Richard would own the company he'd been stealing from. Perfect crime. Victoria sat down heavily. Her legs had stopped supporting her weight. I trusted him. That's what made it work. Rebecca's tone held no sympathy. He counted on your trust. Counted on you being too busy running the company to notice what he was stealing. Counted on you dismissing anyone who questioned him as incompetent or disloyal. The truth landed like a physical blow. Victoria had enabled this. Her cold efficiency, her refusal to see people as human, her blind faith in Richard because questioning him would mean admitting she'd been wrong, all of it had created the perfect environment for corruption to flourish. Her phone buzzed. Robert Callahan. Victoria, the Stellaris CEO is here. We need you in the conference room. Tell him there's been a complication. We need to postpone the signing. Postpone? Robert's voice climbed an octave. Absolutely not. Get down here and make this happen. I can't. Our systems are compromised. Signing a contract we can't fulfill would be fraud. Then uncompromise them. I don't care how. We need this deal. Victoria looked at Marcus, who was still working, fingers flying across keys. How long? To find all the damage and repair it, 12 hours minimum. To get the warehouse system functional enough to demonstrate we can fulfill orders, maybe 2 hours. Not enough time. She had minutes, not hours. Robert, we need to postpone 24 hours. I'll take full responsibility. The board will remove you. Then they remove me, but I won't commit fraud to save my position. She ended the call before he could respond. Her hands were shaking. In 5 minutes of conversation, she had jeopardized everything she'd spent years building, and the strangest part was how little she cared. Marcus glanced up from his laptop. That sounded expensive. Probably cost me my job. Was it worth it? Victoria met his eyes, those gray eyes that had smiled at Rebecca with such warmth, that looked at her now with wariness and something that might have been respect. I'm beginning to think so. The next 3 hours blurred together. Marcus worked with focused intensity, occasionally asking Thomas Brennan technical questions, rejecting most suggestions, implementing fixes that made no sense to anyone but him. Rebecca organized her evidence into presentation format, creating a timeline so clear even a child could follow it. Garrett and Miriam arrived with their own documentation, adding pieces to a puzzle that was becoming impossible to deny. At 4:30, Marcus pushed back from the laptop and exhaled slowly. Warehouse system is functional. Not pretty, but it'll run orders. The rest will take until midnight, maybe longer. Whoever built this backdoor knew what they were doing. Victoria called Robert back. We can proceed with the signing. Systems are operational. About time. Get down here. The Stellaris contract signing took place in Technova's main conference room, with Marcus standing in the back corner, laptop open, monitoring systems in real time. The Stellaris CEO, a retired Air Force general named Hargrove, signed with visible relief. Preston Whitmore and Patricia Mercer, the investors from the restaurant, witnessed the signing with approving nods. Victoria signed her own name and felt nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction. Just exhaustion and the growing awareness that she had been operating in darkness for years, mistaking control for understanding, efficiency for wisdom. After the signing, after the investors left and the board members dispersed, Victoria stood in the empty conference room with Marcus, Rebecca, Garrett, and Miriam. We need to bring this to the board. Her voice was steady, certain. All of it. Tomorrow morning. Emergency meeting. Garrett nodded. I'll draft the meeting request. And Richard? Miriam asked quietly. We'll be there. I'll make sure of it. That night, Victoria couldn't sleep. She sat on her balcony watching the city lights and thinking about a 7-year-old girl who drew pictures of her tired father, about a man who climbed into elevator shafts to save people who would never know his name, about the difference between being powerful and being strong. The father who fixes things in the dark is worth more than the executive who steals credit in the light. The words formed in her mind, unbidden truth she'd been too blind to see. Her phone buzzed at 2 a.m. A text from Marcus: system repairs complete. Full functionality restored. Evidence of sabotage preserved for forensic analysis. She texted back, "Thank you." His reply came 30 seconds later. I didn't do it for you. I did it because Emma deserves to live in a world where people do what's right. Victoria read the message 3 times, then walked to her bathroom and looked at herself in the mirror. The woman staring back was immaculately dressed, perfectly composed, and profoundly lost. When had she stopped being a person and become a position? When had she traded humanity for efficiency? She thought about her mother's voice on the phone. I believed what I wanted to believe because the truth was too frightening. How much truth had Victoria been avoiding? How many Marcus Thorntons had she walked past without seeing? How many people had she treated as disposable because acknowledging their humanity required acknowledging her own? The board meeting was scheduled for 8 a.m. Richard would be there, confident and prepared, not knowing the trap was already sprung. Victoria should have felt triumphant. Instead, she felt sad for all the years she'd wasted, all the people she'd hurt through indifference, all the connections she'd refused to make because connection meant vulnerability and vulnerability meant risk. But as the sun rose over the city, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Victoria made a decision. Risk was the only way forward. Vulnerability was the only path to truth. And if bringing down Richard Brennan cost her everything else, at least she would lose it honestly, standing with people who deserved her loyalty instead of those who'd stolen it through deception. The board meeting assembled everyone who mattered. Robert Callahan in his usual seat at the head of the table, looking annoyed at the early hour and emergency nature of the summons. Richard Brennan arriving with his characteristic confidence designer suit, perfect silver hair gleaming. Stephanie Drake taking her seat next to Richard, loyal to the last. Garrett and Miriam on one side, Rebecca Ashford on the other, boxes of evidence stacked between them. Marcus standing against the wall, arms crossed, watching everything with those gray eyes that missed nothing. Victoria stood at the presentation screen, feeling her heart hammer against her ribs. Thank you all for coming. We've discovered evidence of systematic fraud, embezzlement, and corporate sabotage. Ms. Ashford will present the findings. Richard moved immediately to offense attacking before anyone could question him. His voice dripped with contempt as he gestured at Marcus. What is he doing here? He's just a maintenance technician with a grudge and no credibility. This is clearly... Marcus cut him off, voice quiet but carrying absolute certainty. That's right, I am just a maintenance technician, but that's exactly why I know which screws in this company were twisted by whom, which systems were modified, and which trails were covered. Rebecca stepped forward with the precision of a prosecutor who had spent months building an airtight case. She began with the shell companies showing incorporation documents, wire transfers, money trails that led to offshore accounts registered under names connected to Richard through webs of family and business relationships designed to hide ownership. She moved to the intellectual property theft, displaying Marcus's original technical reports alongside versions with altered authorship and modified dates. The embedded code signatures that proved who had really created the innovations. The emails where Richard coordinated with competitors to sell pieces of technology that didn't belong to him. Stephanie tried to interrupt, voice rising, attempting to discredit Rebecca's credentials or question the investigation's legality. Victoria gestured for silence. Let her finish. The evidence was devastating. $12 million embezzled over 3 years through a network of false consulting contracts and inflated vendor payments. Intellectual property worth another $8 million sold to competitors while the real creators went unrecognized and uncompensated. And finally, the sabotage access log showing Richard's server credentials used to create the backdoor, the timing of the attack designed to coincide with acquisition attempts, email chains, where Richard coordinated with external investment groups planning to buy Technova at artificially depressed prices. Richard had built a masterpiece of corruption, and Rebecca was dismantling it brick by brick in front of witnesses who couldn't look away. Robert Callahan's face transformed from red to pale to something approaching gray as the full scope became clear. The liability, the lawsuits, the regulatory scrutiny, the complete destruction of the board's credibility if this became public. When Rebecca finished, the room sat in stunned silence. Then Richard stood, fury replacing his usual charm. This is fabricated, a conspiracy to... Shut up, Richard. Robert's voice was ice. Just shut up. Victoria rose, drawing every eye. She looked at Richard with something close to pity. I once failed to see Marcus. I treated him as invisible because I trusted the wrong people to tell me what mattered. But today I see exactly who the real saboteur is. She turned to Robert. I'm calling for Richard Brennan's immediate suspension pending criminal investigation. I'm requesting full forensic audit of all financial operations under his oversight, and I'm recommending we cooperate fully with law enforcement rather than attempting to handle this internally. The board voted, 7-0, one member absent. Richard Brennan was escorted from the building within the hour his access revoked his office. Sealed his carefully constructed empire collapsing in a single afternoon. Stephanie resigned before anyone could fire her, recognizing that her association with Richard had become toxic. She cleaned out her desk in 15 minutes and left without saying goodbye to anyone. When the room cleared and only Victoria and Marcus remained, he spoke words that cut deeper than any accusation. I didn't come back for you. I came back because Louisa deserves to live in a decent world. And I couldn't teach her about integrity if I walked away when people needed help. The honesty of it, the complete absence of flattery or manipulation, left Victoria standing silent. Marcus gathered his equipment and walked toward the door. Wait! Her voice stopped him. What happens now? He turned, considering the question. Now you decide what kind of person you want to be. Someone who learns from this or someone who goes back to the way things were. And you, I testify against Richard. Then I find a job somewhere that values what I do instead of exploiting it. Emma and I move on. He left. The door closed. Victoria stood in the empty conference room, victorious and hollow, having saved the company only to realize she had lost something more important, the chance to become someone worthy of respect from people who mattered. But perhaps she thought walking to her office to draft her letter of temporary resignation to the board. Perhaps it wasn't too late to change. Perhaps integrity, like anything else worth having, required practice and failure and the willingness to keep trying even when success seemed impossible. The sun was setting over the city when Victoria finally left the office. For the first time in 10 years, she walked out before midnight. And for the first time in her life, she understood that power without compassion was just another form of weakness. That control without connection was just another kind of prison. And that the people you ignore in darkness might be the very ones who save you when the light finally comes. The board met again 48 hours after Richard's suspension. Victoria sat at the table, but the energy in the room had shifted fundamentally. Robert Callahan no longer looked at her with approval. The other board members avoided her eyes. Victoria, you uncovered the fraud. That took courage. Robert's words held no warmth. But Richard operated under your leadership for 2 years. This happened on your watch. I understand. The board votes to suspend you for 60 days pending a full audit of your leadership decisions and oversight failures. Garrett Sullivan will serve as acting CEO during this period. Victoria nodded, accepting the consequence without protest. She had expected worse. I'll cooperate fully with any investigation. Your suspension begins immediately. You'll need to surrender your office access and work from home until the audit concludes. Garrett looked uncomfortable, but he didn't argue. He had earned this opportunity through competence and integrity. Victoria shook his hand before leaving the building for what might be the last time as an employee. The first week of suspension passed in strange stillness. Victoria's apartment, which she'd barely inhabited beyond sleeping, became a prison of silence and reflection. No meetings, no authority, no purpose beyond waiting. She called her mother again. They talked for 3 hours, working through years of distance and avoidance. Eleanor Hayes had remarried, Victoria learned. A kind man who taught high school history and made her laugh. They lived in Vermont now in a house with a garden. You should visit, Eleanor offered gently. Maybe I will. And Victoria, whatever you're going through, don't make my mistake. Don't let fear keep you from living. Marcus spent those same days in Rebecca's office going through depositions with federal prosecutors who asked the same questions 17 different ways, looking for inconsistencies they could exploit. The process was exhausting and invasive, dredging up 3 years of stolen work documented humiliation, evidence of systematic exploitation. Emma noticed her father's tension. She was 7 years old, but she'd learned to read stress in the set of his shoulders, the tightness around his eyes. "Daddy, is the bad lady going to jail?" Marcus paused while making dinner, considering how to explain complex adult corruption to a child. "Not her. Someone else who did bad things. But she was mean to you." "Yes, she was. But sometimes people are mean because they don't know better, not because they're bad." Emma frowned, processing this distinction with the seriousness she brought to difficult concepts. "Will she learn better?" "I don't know, sweetheart. I hope so." Victoria began her transformation with small, concrete actions. She enrolled in online programming courses, spending 8 hours a day learning Python and SQL, trying to understand the technical work she'd dismissed for years. The code made no sense at first, a foreign language of logic and structure. But she persisted, driven by the need to comprehend what Marcus did, what Richard had stolen, what she had failed to protect. By the second week, she could read basic functions and understand variable assignments. By the third week, she wrote her first program, a simple calculator that did nothing useful, but represented something fundamental: the willingness to sit with confusion and incompetence long enough to grow beyond them. She also drafted the policy proposals she would present to the board, assuming they allowed her to return. The transparent innovation credit system would log every employee's contributions with digital signatures and public quarterly reports. The Caregiver Support Fund would provide flexible scheduling, emergency backup, childcare subsidies, and protection from retaliation. The Executive Accountability Framework would make department heads personally liable for subordinate mistreatment. Each policy addressed a specific way she had failed Marcus. Each one cost money and required structural change. She designed them anyway, knowing they might never be implemented, knowing her suspension could become termination, but needing to articulate the world she wished she'd built before. 3 weeks into her suspension, Victoria made a decision that surprised even herself. She called Lincoln Elementary School and asked about their reading volunteer program. The coordinator sounded skeptical. "We always need volunteers, but the program requires a 6-week commitment. Tuesdays and Thursdays, 2 to 3:30. "I can do that. Background check required, references, training session this Saturday. Send me the paperwork." Victoria showed up for training in jeans and a sweater, the most casual outfit she'd worn in a decade. The other volunteers were mostly retired teachers and stay-at-home parents. They looked at her designer watch and expensive handbag with barely concealed suspicion. She learned how to read picture books with expression, how to ask questions that engaged children's imaginations, how to make voices for different characters. It felt ridiculous and vulnerable and strangely wonderful. Her first day volunteering, she was assigned to a second-grade classroom. Ms. Jennifer Walsh greeted her warmly, unaware of any connection to Marcus. The children sat in a circle on the carpet, eager and squirming. Victoria opened Where the Wild Things Are and began to read. Her voice was stiff at first, formal and uncomfortable. A boy in the front row raised his hand. "You're supposed to do the voices, make it fun." Victoria tried. She growled, for the wild things made her voice small and scared for Max. The children giggled. She felt heat in her cheeks but continued, surrendering dignity for engagement. Emma Thornton sat in the back of the circle. Victoria didn't see her at first, focused on the book and managing her own nervousness. But when she looked up during a page turn, their eyes met. Emma's face went carefully blank. She didn't say anything, didn't raise her hand, just watched with those gray eyes that were so much like her father's. After the session, Emma approached her while the other children were lining up for recess. "Why are you here?" The question held no hostility, just genuine confusion. Victoria knelt so they were at eye level. "I'm volunteering. I come on Tuesdays and Thursdays to read to classes." "Because of my daddy?" "No, because I want to learn how to be better." Emma considered this, her small face serious. "You made the wild thing sound scary. That was good." "Thank you. But you still made Daddy sad." Victoria's throat tightened. "I know. I'm sorry for that." Emma nodded and ran off to join her classmates at recess. Victoria stood alone in the empty classroom, feeling like she'd just taken a test and barely passed. Ms. Walsh found her there. "You know Emma Thornton? I used to work with her father. He's devoted to that little girl. Comes to every school event, volunteers for field trips, makes sure she knows she's loved. She's lucky to have him." "Yes, she is." Victoria continued volunteering week after week. Emma gradually warmed to her, asking questions about the books, offering her own interpretations of stories. But she never invited Victoria to sit with her, never sought her out before or after class. The distance remained. Marcus found out about Victoria's volunteering in week 4. Ms. Walsh mentioned it casually during pickup, praising the new volunteer who did wonderful character voices. "Victoria Hayes has been coming Tuesdays and Thursdays. Emma seems to enjoy her reading sessions." Marcus felt something complex move through his chest: surprise, concern, suspicion, and something else he didn't want to name. That evening he waited outside the school at 2:30 on a Tuesday, watching. Victoria emerged at 3:40 carrying picture books back to her car. She looked different in casual clothes, softer, somehow less armored. Marcus intercepted her in the parking lot. "Why are you here?" She turned, startled. "I volunteer. At my daughter's school. I didn't know she'd be in one of my assigned classrooms. I can request a different—" "That's not what I asked. Why are you volunteering at an elementary school?" Victoria set the books on her car hood, buying time to form an answer. "Emma told me I needed to do better, not just say better. This is me trying to understand the world you live in." Marcus studied her face, looking for deception and finding only exhaustion and uncertainty. "You didn't have to do this." "Yes, I did. You told me to decide what kind of person I wanted to be. This is part of that decision." They stood in uncomfortable silence, the afternoon sun slanting across the parking lot, children's voices carrying from the playground. "The retroactive bonus you paid me, that was public. You earned recognition. And the policy proposals Karen mentioned, the Caregiver Support Fund. It's what should have existed all along." Marcus's expression shifted, the wariness cracking slightly. "Do you want to get coffee sometime?" The question caught Victoria off guard. Her heart stuttered. "Yes, I'd like that." They met the following Saturday at a Starbucks equidistant from both their neighborhoods, neutral territory. Marcus arrived first, already seated with black coffee when Victoria walked in. She ordered tea and joined him, the small table feeling vast and fragile between them. The first 10 minutes were awkward, filled with weather observations and careful questions about work. Then Marcus mentioned Emma's upcoming science fair project on volcanoes. "She's been testing different chemical reactions for the eruption. We've gone through about 50 vinegar and baking soda combinations." Victoria smiled. "That sounds messy. Our kitchen looks like a disaster zone, but she's learning the scientific method, so I count it as success." They found easier rhythm after that, talking about Emma's interests, about books Victoria was reading to the children, about the absurdity of trying to learn programming at 34 with no technical background. "What made you want to learn code?" Marcus asked. "I wanted to understand what you do, what Richard stole, what I should have valued." "That's a lot of weight to put on Python tutorials." "Maybe, but I needed to start somewhere." Their second coffee meeting 2 weeks later went deeper. Marcus told her about the first day of school after Sarah died, about Emma crying for an hour, about almost quitting his job because being present for his daughter mattered more than anything else. "She needed to know I wouldn't disappear, that I'd always come back." Victoria found herself sharing things she rarely admitted: her mother's depression, her father's abandonment, the vow she'd made at 12 years old never to be vulnerable. "I built my whole life around never needing anyone, never being weak. And I was miserable without knowing it." Marcus leaned back, considering her. "What changed?" "I saw you smile at that restaurant, and I realized I'd never felt what you clearly felt with Rebecca, which was connection, being seen, having someone respect you enough to listen when you speak." Their third meeting happened at a park. Marcus brought Emma, who ran ahead, to the playground while the adults walked slowly around the perimeter path. Victoria asked about Marcus's work before Technova, before the tragedy that had reshaped his life. He told her about MIT, about the excitement of solving impossible problems, about believing the future was limitless and full of promise. And then Sarah died and the future collapsed into a single question: how do I keep Emma safe? Victoria heard the weight in those words, understood the sacrifice they represented. Do you regret it, giving up that career? No. Emma needed me more than I needed professional glory. That was an easy choice. You make it sound simple. It was simple. Not easy, but simple. A month into their careful friendship, Emma asked the question that changed everything. Daddy, can Miss Victoria come to my birthday party? Marcus paused while washing dishes. You want her there? She's nice now. She does funny voices, and she brought cupcakes to my class. I don't know if she can make it, sweetheart. Please ask. Marcus texted Victoria that evening. Emma's birthday party, Saturday at 2. Don't bring expensive gifts. Victoria stared at the invitation for 10 minutes before responding. I'd be honored. She agonized over the gift, finally settling on a journal with Emma's name embossed on the cover, simple, personal, useful. She arrived at Marcus's apartment building nervous in a way boardroom negotiations had never made her. The apartment was transformed with homemade decorations, streamers, balloons, a banner that read, Happy 8th birthday, Emma, in uneven letters clearly created by a child. 8 kids from Emma's class ran around the small space playing games Victoria didn't understand. Emma opened the door, her face brightening. Miss Victoria came. She pulled Victoria inside, introducing her to friends with unself-conscious enthusiasm. Victoria spent the next 2 hours playing party games, helping serve cake, washing dishes, while Marcus supervised a game of musical chairs in the living room. She watched him with the children, patient, playful, completely present. He refereed disputes with quiet authority, made up silly rules that kept everyone laughing, knew exactly when to intervene and when to let kids work things out themselves. This was Marcus in his element, and Victoria saw clearly what she had been too blind to recognize before: competence wasn't just technical skill or professional achievement. It was showing up for people who needed you day after day without recognition or reward. After the other children left, Emma opened her presents. She saved Victoria's journal for last, turning it over in her small hands, running fingers across the embossed letters. For my stories. Her voice was quiet, pleased. I thought you could write about your adventures. Emma looked up at Victoria with those serious gray eyes. Thank you, Miss Victoria. Later, while Emma napped on the couch, exhausted from excitement, Marcus and Victoria cleaned up in relative silence. They moved around each other in the small kitchen with surprising ease, finding rhythm without discussion. Thank you for letting me be here. Marcus rinsed a plate, considering his response. Emma wanted you here. That's what mattered. Can I ask you something? Okay. Do you think you could ever trust me? Really trust me, not just tolerate me for Emma's sake? Marcus dried his hands, slowly buying time. I don't know. You hurt me badly, not just the accusations, the complete dismissal of my humanity, like I was equipment, not a person. I know, and I can't undo that. No, you can't, but you're trying to do better. That counts for something. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was acknowledgement, and in that moment it felt like enough. Victoria's 60-day suspension ended with a board meeting she attended via video conference. Garrett had stabilized operations, restored customer confidence, and managed the investor relationship through Technova's crisis. He'd proven himself more than capable. Robert Callahan's face filled her screen, stern but not hostile. Victoria, you exposed the fraud. You cooperated with the investigation. Your policy proposals are comprehensive and necessary. Thank you. The board votes to reinstate you as CEO effective immediately, with the condition that all proposed policies are implemented within 90 days, with Garrett overseeing the rollout. Victoria had expected conditions. She accepted without hesitation. Understood. There's one more thing. We've become aware that you've been spending time with Marcus Thornton. Her stomach clenched. We're friends. Mr. Thornton is a key witness in ongoing federal litigation against Richard Brennan. Your relationship creates the appearance of impropriety. The defense could argue you're influencing his testimony. I'm not. The appearance is enough. Board policy prohibits fraternization with employees involved in active legal proceedings. If you continue this relationship while the case is pending, we'll have grounds for termination. Marcus had warned her this might happen. Rebecca had predicted it, but hearing it as formal ultimatum made Victoria's chest tighten. How long until the trial? 6 months according to the prosecution timeline. 6 months of not seeing Marcus, not talking to him, not continuing the fragile thing they were building together. 6 months of distance that might undo all the progress they'd made. I understand the policy, but understanding didn't mean accepting. That evening, Victoria called an emergency board meeting. Robert sounded annoyed when he answered. What now? I'm requesting a leave of absence, 3 months unpaid. You were just reinstated. Why would you? Personal reasons. Garrett can continue as acting CEO. He's proven himself more than capable. Robert's silence stretched long enough that Victoria wondered if the call had dropped. Then this is about Thornton. This is about not wanting to interfere with federal prosecution. If I take a leave of absence, I'm not an employee during that period. No fraternization policy applies. You'd give up your position for this? For 3 months? Yes. Another pause. The board will discuss and vote tomorrow. They approved her request with obvious reluctance. Victoria cleaned out her office for the second time in 2 months, this time voluntarily, this time knowing she might not return. Garrett walked her to her car. You don't have to do this. Yes, I do. Marcus's testimony could put Richard away for decades. I won't let our friendship compromise that. You're in love with him. Victoria stopped walking. The words hung in the air between them, true and terrifying. Maybe, I don't know. But I know he matters more than my title. Then go. Figure it out. The company will still be here when you get back. Marcus learned about Victoria's leave of absence from Rebecca, who called him after seeing the company announcement. She stepped down. What? Victoria requested unpaid leave, 3 months. The board approved it this morning. Marcus sat down heavily. She gave up her position for me. For your testimony, so there's no appearance of influence. She's protecting the case. He called Victoria immediately. She answered on the first ring. You didn't have to do this. Her voice was quiet but firm. Yes, I did. Your testimony matters too much. If Richard's lawyers can discredit you by claiming I influenced you, he might walk free. I won't risk that. So you just quit? 3-month leave. Garrett's running things. When the trial's over, I'll decide what comes next. And us? The question hung heavy with possibility and fear. Victoria took a breath before answering. I'd like there to be an us, if you're willing to try. The trial of Richard Brennan began on a Tuesday in federal court downtown Boston. Marcus testified for 3 full days, walking the jury through technical evidence, explaining how his innovations had been stolen, how Richard had exploited his work for personal profit. Richard's defense attorney attacked from every angle, suggesting Marcus was bitter about being passed over for promotion, implying the theft allegations were revenge fantasy. Isn't it true you're romantically involved with Ms. Hayes, who had motive to frame my client? Marcus kept his voice steady. No, we're friends, that's all. But you want more, don't you? What I want is justice for everyone Richard Brennan hurt, including myself. The jury deliberated for 12 hours. When they returned, the verdict was unanimous, guilty on all counts: wire fraud, embezzlement, racketeering. The judge sentenced Richard to 18 years in federal prison plus $12 million in restitution. Marcus walked out of the courthouse into cold November air, feeling lighter than he had in years. Rebecca stood beside him, satisfaction evident in her smile. We did it. You did it. I just told the truth. That's all we ever needed from you. Victoria was waiting across the street, having watched from the public gallery without approaching. Marcus saw her there, hesitant and hopeful, and something in his chest finally let go. He crossed the street. They stood facing each other on the sidewalk, pedestrians flowing around them like water around stones. "It's over." Victoria nodded. "I heard. 18 years. He'll be 70 before he's released." "Good." Silence stretched between them, full of everything unsaid over 6 months of careful distance. Then Marcus spoke words he'd been rehearsing for weeks. "I need you to know I'm not looking for someone to save me. I don't need rescuing. I know. What I need is a partner. Someone who sees Emma and me as we are not a project to fix." "I see you." "Do you?" "Because I need to hear it. I need to know what you see when you look at me." Victoria took a breath, steadying herself for honesty. "I see someone who sacrifices without complaint. Someone who builds things in darkness because they need building, not because anyone will notice. I see a father who would give up everything for his daughter, and a man who taught me that strength isn't about control, it's about showing up." "And what do you see in yourself?" "I see someone who was lost and may be found because of you." Marcus stepped closer. "Can I kiss you?" "Yes." The kiss was gentle, tentative, full of promise rather than demand. When they pulled apart, Victoria was crying and Marcus was smiling, and the world felt wider and more possible than it had in years. Emma's blessing came later when Victoria asked for it directly. She went to their apartment on a Saturday, nervous in a way courtrooms had never made her. Emma was coloring at the kitchen table, tongue caught between her teeth in concentration. Victoria sat across from her, waiting until the little girl looked up. "Emma, can I talk to you about something important?" "Okay. Your daddy and I care about each other, and I wanted to ask how you'd feel if I spent more time with you both." Emma set down her crayon, considering the question with characteristic seriousness. "Will you make him cry again?" "No, I promise." "Will you make him smile, the real smile, not the tired one?" "I'll try my best." Emma studied Victoria's face, searching for truth. Whatever she saw satisfied her. "Okay, but you have to do the voices when you read, always." Victoria laughed, relieved and grateful. "Deal." 6 months later, Tech Nova had transformed. The Caregiver Support Fund served 120 employees who used flexible scheduling to manage family responsibilities. The Innovation Credit System had promoted 45 people based on recognized contributions. Anonymous reports of executive abuse dropped to 0. The company culture shifted from fear-based compliance to engaged collaboration. Garrett had proven himself exceptional as CEO. When the board offered to make his position permanent, with Victoria transitioning to Chief Operating Officer, she accepted without hesitation. The demotion would have devastated her 2 years ago. Now it felt like freedom. Marcus worked as Senior Technical Fellow, a position Victoria had created specifically for him. He led innovation teams, set his own hours, and left at 5 every day to pick up Emma. Other employees brought their children to the homework room Victoria had built on the 2nd floor, a bright space with books and games and supervision for kids whose parents worked late. The role suited him. He solved problems, mentored younger engineers, and went home to his daughter without sacrificing either commitment. The recognition he'd been denied for years finally came, and he accepted it with quiet grace. On a Tuesday evening in May, Victoria, Marcus, and Emma sat at a booth in Angelo's, a neighborhood Italian restaurant where pasta dinners cost $15 and the owner knew everyone by name. No pretension, no performance, just good food and comfortable chairs. Emma chattered about octopuses, sharing facts from a library book with the enthusiasm only 8-year-olds could muster. "Did you know they have 3 hearts, 3, and they can change color to match rocks?" Victoria listened with genuine interest, asking questions that made Emma's eyes shine. Marcus watched them both, feeling contentment settle into his bones. The tired wariness that had defined him for years had eased into something softer, more open. He reached across the table and took Victoria's hand. She squeezed back her thumb, tracing small circles on his palm. Emma paused mid-sentence about camouflage techniques. "Are you going to get married?" Marcus nearly choked on his water. Victoria's eyes went wide. "That's a big question, sweetheart. But are you?" Marcus looked at Victoria, finding her gaze steady and unafraid. They hadn't discussed marriage explicitly, but the trajectory was clear. They were building something permanent, something that would outlast corporate positions and legal proceedings and all the obstacles they'd already overcome. Maybe someday. Would that be okay with you? Emma considered taking the question as seriously as she took everything. Will you still live with us? I'd have to. That's how marriage works. And you'll still do the voices? Victoria laughed. Always. Then okay. They finished dinner in easy conversation, Emma eventually falling asleep against Marcus's shoulder, exhausted from her own enthusiasm. Victoria watched the little girl's face relax into peaceful stillness and felt something profound shift inside her. This was what mattered, not quarterly earnings or board approval or professional recognition. This small family built from tragedy and second chances from honesty and hard work, and the willingness to keep trying when failure seemed inevitable. They walked to the parking lot together, Marcus carrying Emma, Victoria holding his jacket. The spring air was warm, promising summer ahead. Thank you, Marcus said quietly. For what? For changing. For really changing, not just saying you would. Victoria looked up at him, this man she had dismissed and underestimated and nearly destroyed through her own blindness. Thank you for giving me the chance. You didn't have to. No, but I wanted to. Because people who admit their mistakes and do the work to fix them, those people deserve chances. They reached Victoria's car first. Marcus shifted Emma's weight, preparing to carry her to his truck, but Victoria stopped him with a hand on his arm. Marcus, yeah, I love you. I should have said it sooner, but I'm saying it now. He smiled, the real smile that had first caught her attention at a restaurant that seemed like a lifetime ago. I love you too, both of us do. Emma stirred, mumbling something about octopuses before settling back into sleep. Marcus kissed Victoria goodnight, gentle and unhurried, then carried his daughter across the parking lot toward home. Victoria drove back to her apartment. She and Marcus hadn't moved in together yet, taking their time building their foundation carefully, and sat for a moment in her car, looking up at the building that had once been her entire world. She thought about the woman she'd been 2 years ago. Certain that power was everything, that control was strength, that needing people meant weakness. That woman would be horrified by the choices Victoria had made. Stepping down from CEO, learning to read children's books with silly voices, falling in love with a man who fixed machines in the dark and measured success by his daughter's smile. But that woman had been wrong about everything that mattered. Success wasn't about climbing higher or earning more or controlling others through fear and efficiency. Success was coming home to people who saw you completely, who loved you. Not despite your flaws, but through them, who believed you could become better and helped you do the work required. The father who teaches his daughter that showing up is more important than showing off had taught Victoria more about leadership than any business school ever could. That thought crystallized as she rode the elevator up to her apartment, thinking about everything Marcus had shown her through example rather than lecture. 1 year after the trial, Technova held its annual Innovation Award ceremony. Marcus received recognition for the predictive maintenance system that had saved the company $8 million. He accepted the award wearing jeans and a button-down shirt, his speech brief and focused on the team that had helped implement his designs. Victoria sat in the audience next to Emma, who wore a sundress for the occasion, and whispered proudly to the stranger beside her, "That's my daddy." After the ceremony, employees approached Marcus to congratulate him, to ask technical questions, to thank him for mentoring them through difficult projects. He handled each interaction with patient attention, remembering names and details, making everyone feel seen. This was the man Victoria had walked past for 2 years without noticing. This was what she had almost destroyed through arrogance and willful blindness, but she noticed now. And she would keep noticing, keep choosing to see the people others overlooked, keep remembering that the most important work often happened in darkness, performed by people who didn't seek credit but deserved it nonetheless. Emma tugged on Victoria's sleeve. "Can we go to the park after this?" "Absolutely. All 3 of us. All 3 of us." The little girl beamed secure in the knowledge that her family, however unconventional its formation, was solid and permanent. She had two parents now, the father who'd never left and the woman who'd had to learn how to stay. Marcus finished his conversations and joined them, Emma immediately taking his hand. Victoria took his other hand, and together they walked out of the building into afternoon sunshine. The future stretched ahead, uncertain but no longer frightening. There would be challenges, there always were. Emma would grow up and need different things. Victoria and Marcus would face conflicts that required working through. The company would encounter new crises requiring new solutions, but they would face it together, three people who'd learned that strength came from connection. That vulnerability was courage, that the most radical act in a world obsessed with individual achievement was choosing to need each other and honor that need without shame. 2 years after the restaurant, Victoria understood what Marcus's smile had represented that night. It was the expression of someone who knew he was seen, valued, loved for exactly who he was. It was what she'd been missing her entire life, not because it wasn't available, but because she'd been too afraid to reach for it. Now she reached. Now she stayed. Now she did the work every day of being someone worthy of the trust Marcus had granted despite every reason not to. And on quiet evenings when Emma was asleep and they sat together on Marcus's couch, Victoria sometimes thought about the path that had brought them here, through corporate fraud and broken trust and painful reckoning with her own failures. The journey had cost her professional glory, but given her something irreplaceable: a home built on honesty, a family forged through choice, a love that required work but offered rewards beyond measure. The people you ignore in darkness might be the very ones who save you when the light finally comes. Victoria had learned that lesson through loss and struggle and the gradual dismantling of everything she'd once believed about power. But she'd learned it, and that made all the difference.